announcements?
Let the record show Mrs. Rhodes also called in and had a previous engagement, will not be able to make it tonight.
Mrs. Shipley? Here. Mr. Calero?
Here. Citizens' comments?
We have no comment cards this evening.
All right, thank you. Well, you've all received some budget discussion meeting notes here. Jim's going to cover a few of the items here. I've met with Jim a couple of times, discussed some of the items that we have. As we all know, it's the biggest part of the budget is wages and salary, and some of that will be discussed tonight as some of the expenditures that we'll be dealing with in those. So, Jim, do you want to maybe start off here?
Sure. Thank you, Bob.
All right.
To go over the tonight's topic of discussion, we're going to review the progress towards completing the proposed 2015-16 general fund budget for May 2015 adoption. The deadline to pass a proposed budget is May 31st, and of course June 30th is the deadline for a final budget. I have some suggested dates in May, and again, they're just suggestions, to have a special budget adoption meeting on May 21st, then leaving the 30 days before final adoption on June 25th, which we could celebrate that night. It's my birthday. But if you wanted to fit it in within the existing schedule, we have a meeting on May 14th?
That would be correct.
And then you would have to have a final budget at least 30 days after, so you might be June 18th. But again, that's just something to think about and discuss. We can look at our calendars. Attached to these talking points is a one-page summary of the budget. And of course, let's remember this is not the budget. This is just a working draft. I kept the one-page format that we've been using. I inserted an additional 15-16 column, which I highlighted in yellow, and that denotes the numbers as they stand right now. The March 5th column, I highlighted in light green to distinguish the two. I also added at the bottom of the page the actual fund balances as they existed when we closed our books for the 13-14 school year. So on the one-page summary, you have the draft from May 5th in a very light green, the draft as it stands today on April 23rd. I entered the complete ERIP savings program, and that made a significant difference to the final net salaries and wages, as well as Social Security and retirement and other benefit categories. I also cleaned up some old accounts that had carried over into the first budget manual, which then overstated expenditures. There were some old access accounts and some old Title I and Title II accounts. And I've worked those numbers out of the budget, so that helped with the net effect between the March draft and this current draft. This updated version has an overall increase right now in budgetary expenditures of $1,327,317, or 4.87%. Last month, that figure was a budgetary increase of $1,712,487, or 6.26%. So the projected increase in budgetary expenditures has gone down by $385,170. And of course, a major part of those increase in budgetary expenditures are those special projects and equipment purchases of $531,000. And again, on that one-page summary, just like last month, I pulled them out. So they're in the total dollars, but I highlighted them at the bottom right in that skin tone or light buff color, just so that they stand out for further discussion. And of course, if we proceed with any or all of these, then I would assume that we would either use our assigned fund balances or some sort of project financing if that would be desired to save the cash. I made some modest updates in the local and state revenues to approximate their current collection levels, but I have not booked an Act 1 tax increase, nor have I booked any of the Governor Wolf proposed new monies. Therefore, revenues have increased from the current year budget of $421,000 or 1.57%. Now, that's a modest change from our draft from last month of an additional $53,000. The bottom line in this current draft is a deficit of $1,907,561, but that's before taking into account using our committed EREP funds of $304,500, the planned budgetary reserves of $100,000, and taking out those special projects and equipment of $531,000. Therefore, our true operating deficit right now as it stands is $971,995 versus last month's draft of $1,410,165. Again, that's a net improvement from last year's draft of $438,000. And again, I want to emphasize there's no projected tax increase nor any of the new monies proposed by Governor Wolf. I think it would be premature to propose any kind of tax increase without knowing what, if any, new funding would come from the state. Of course, there's still work to do towards completing the proposed budget for May adoption, and of course there will also be, after that point, work towards completing a final budget. I know we have continued discussion on those technology and facility improvement projects, and of course, if you want to tonight, think about either having a separate May adoption meeting or another special May budget discussion meeting. I also attached a 4-page handout. As Mr. Claro mentioned, he and I have been communicating back and forth. He sent in some questions, some comments. We met last Friday for about 3.5 hours to discuss the budget and these items, and I reprinted them, leaving Mr. Claro's comments in black, and then I used various shades of blue as my responses. He touched on estimates made for natural gas increases, laundry services used in the athletic department, the various postage accounts that are budgeted, some benefit accounts in the special education area, our contracted psychological services, some other accounts in superintendent's office that, again, there's accounts in this book that are still waiting the input of the account description. We've been working on that, chiseling away at inputting those account descriptions. So there's some, as you're going through the book, you see numbers, but you don't see a description. There was a comment regarding the contracted carriers for student activities, a question regarding our administrative software and licensing fees that are budgeted in the technology department, other purchased technical services in the facilities department, a look at, again, in the facilities department, the various supply categories. Bob looked at we discussed the contract we have with ComDoc on our mainline printers and associated peripheral printers. Bob looked at the estimated booking for van driver salaries. And then we looked at the supply accounts from the school building level, the regular building general supply accounts and their specific accounts for their bids, paper and other bulk items.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate that. In your opportunity to review the entire package, not what we received tonight, but the budget package put together by Jim and his staff, Any questions or any issues or anything you need further explanation on?
Well, let me note again that I decided that for our adoption in May, we would have updated pages for the budget book, rather than updating pages now and updating pages again, so on and so forth. As we continue to clean up the book, we'll provide updated pages. So I'll send out a communication letting you know that either drop off your 3-ring binder, or I can bring the inserts to a meeting. So I'm sorry, Bob, I just wanted to throw
That's fine, that's fine. Thank you, Jim. Just to clarify, the true current draft operating deficit of $971,000, if we were using monies from the general fund, we would be reducing that down by approximately $500,000 or so?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're down to, at least if using the general fund, down to just a little over $500,000, or a little under $500,000. Another question that came up, and I talked to Dr. Molnar about this a little bit, the proposal for project for equipment. Talked about funding for that. As the opportunities there are to fund it all in 1 year, fund it over a period of time, or as you said, even borrow against it to preserve the money in the fund balance.
Yes.
Have there been any discussion with Mr. Pushkar about how he wants to deal with that, or Jack, do you want to?
Dr. Scott, you want to address the technology equipment? You've been working with Mr. Pushkar on that. And what?
Well, I met with both you and Jim yesterday, and asked that 320 figure become a 220
Okay.
figure, and now we wish to, in the May planning session, present our sustainable technology refresh plan for the district at that time as part of the curriculum.
Tim, that reduction at 220 as opposed to what it is right now, that would be, again, a complete replacement of that. You've just lowered the figure of what you needed without getting into specifics.
Yeah, and I guess, Bob, traditionally, every year, in years past, you had money budgeted in the general fund budget for curriculum updates, in a cycle. You do math, science, social studies, English language arts. We did that for many, many, many years. I think we had a 7-year cycle worked out.
Right.
And then when the Great Recession hit, we ended up just going off cycle and completely just taking that out of the budget. And what's happening in education and in society today is, with the influx of using technology as a platform for accessing curriculum, it's kind of, if we go back to trying to purchase hardback standalone textbooks, we're going to get caught in the wash. And what we're going to talk about extensively next month is we're partnering with the Allegheny County School District in a one-to-one initiative to use devices as a platform for learning. So rather than having a math adoption and then a social studies adoption, we want to phase in a device adoption where we would be putting technology in the hands of all of our teachers and all of our students in approximately 2.5 years. And we want to get into great detail in that in May.
Now, just if I interrupt you, that's as opposed to actually buying textbooks and updating textbooks. You're talking about using technology, just updating on the technology.
Yes, and then you use the technology to access the
New,
content.
right.
And so, in doing that, Dan Clare, John Pushkar, myself have been working on that for the last couple of months. And in order to get us through the year one of our phase-in, we could go, so the $220,000 would be to get us through year one of our one-to-one phase-in, plus a little extra to put Band-Aids on the existing equipment that we have to keep going while everyone else is waiting for the phase-in. So, and that's where, and the big difference is because we've actually just, it's amazing how in an era of rising prices, there's some things that pricing is going down, and technology happens to be one of them. So In the last month, we've been able to get some real accurate pricing on what this would cost in the first year. But again, what has to happen then, in years past, is you would have a line item for curriculum adoption every year. We're going to be proposing a specific line item that's going to cover curriculum, but it's really curriculum through technology purchases.
Are those, I'm assuming those purchases are expected to be cheaper than buying the hardback and the books and basically all of the hard material as opposed to getting it electronically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right, you're buying licenses
Right.
instead of paper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, have you guys worked out the mechanics, how that will change the budgeting for it? Mr. Pushkar's items are under tab 18. And at the bottom, on page 3 under tab 18 are the estimate he gave us for the $225,000 for 250 teacher computers. And there was a $5,000 estimate for upgrading the high school phone system. Then on page 4, the final page, was another $90,000 for network electronic equipment upgrading. So if we're going to cut $100,000, does he know how that $100,000 is going to be deleted from these items?
Yes.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, Jim, I do, and really that, in our phase-in, so again, so it's not a 320 figure. If we're, for example, if we're going to phase in one-to-one technology in one of our schools first, then we're going to have to do the infrastructure upgrade, concentrate on one building at a time. And that way, because again, if you try to do it all at once, you might find 18 months down the road that something you just did isn't today's industry standard. So actually, that 220 figure is actually going to cover about 500 computers for teachers and students in one school building, plus the infrastructure upgrades and the licensing that's needed to make it all work.
It's an interesting plan.
Very similar to what Amy was talking about several months ago, when she brought in her iPad today. But as far as where education really seems to be going is towards Google and Google Education and Google Apps and Google Chromebooks, and just really getting some amazing performance and amazing pricing that was just unheard of a few years ago. And the reason why more schools are jumping into it now is just because for the first time it truly is becoming possibly affordable to do. And we'd like to present in May and give you more specifics on the curriculum side of it. But again, John's been working just up till today on pricing, and we really think that the 220 figure would get us through that first year of our phase-in with everything that we need.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jim, you and I had talked a little bit about some of these items that are on the last page. And I believe some of them you're still working on, like postage and some of the contract, those things. So there'll be some minor adjustments made there too also.
Yes,
before
there will be, yes.
Okay.
I'd also ask Lee and Charlie to be here this evening. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. Down in you have a copy? You get a copy? Yeah. On page 2, they're down in the brown section. That Patterson pump that's listed on there, Lee. That was already completed. That's already completed. Yeah. So that would have come out of this year's, right?
Yeah, I would. I was just going to ask. Charlie, I had a question. One that I presented to Jim, and I noticed that the laundry expenditure had gone up. And can you just explain a little bit about that?
Seeing how big the number was, I left these as a discussion item, either
Under that laundry, it's actually reconditioning two of our equipment. And one of the laws that were passed recently in the last few years is all our helmets, any helmets and shoulder pads that are over 10 years old can no longer be used. They can't be recertified. They have to be taken out of commission. So the last few years, so that means any helmets that was bought, well, this year would be 2005, is no longer able to be used. So we had to buy a couple replacement helmets there, which they run roughly around $200 to $300 a piece. So that's the only issue that's jumped on it. I think last year we ended up with 10 or 12 helmets. And what I've got the staff looking at, and we've actually went with another recertificate contract guy with Century Sports. It looks like a better deal that he's given us as far as reconditioning helmets, painting. It looks like it's actually much better than what we were getting in the past. This is the first year we're using it, so I'm hoping to see some savings that way. And also, we're going to start monitoring, like before he gives us any helmets or replaces helmets, we can kind of take an inventory and see, how many kids we have. Do we need this many helmets this year? Can we kind of just budget ourselves like maybe we only need 5 this year? Next year we pick up a few more because you also got shoulder pads. So we got to be real smart with that. That's why you've seen a little bit of a jump. But we'll control that. I don't see any need to increase anything there. I'll keep an eye on making sure that we stay under that budget. As far as laundry, we've barely, there's only a few, maybe not even $1,000 we use to clean all the uniforms. So it's stayed status quo. We just got to be smart on how we're spending on replacing equipment now. But that's why you've seen a jump the last 2 years. Those helmets that they've had in the past are no longer, with the concussions that they're using, the safety aspect of it, they won't let us use a helmet that's over 10 years old.
That laundry service, none of that is done in-house, that's all?
Well, we do some in-house, but our football uniforms we've been sending out to Century Sports. They pick them up with the MRSA and all the other issues that we've got with diseases on these fields. A lot of the turf fields, we don't know whether they're being cleaned the way they should be. Kids, they spit on them, they do it with blood. They clean them, sanitize them, bring them back for us, and it's less than like $1 something a uniform for each week. So, we've been sending out roughly 25, 30 uniforms. It costs us about $70 a week for a game. So it's actually a pretty good service. We know they're getting cleaned. They fix any of the tears that may happen in the jerseys, so we're getting a longer life out of them. But we still do all our practice stuff in-house.
Do they do that for the wrestling uniforms also, or those the responsibility of the
Wrestling uniforms, usually parents, the kids take them home and clean them.
What about the helmets and pads and all that accumulate sweat? And do they get sent out for cleaning too?
At the end of the year, all the other, like our practice pads and stuff, we'll clean them periodically. But that's why we send out the uniforms, our game uniforms. But that's where the cost is coming in. Like a shoulder pad's the same thing. If it's over 10 years old, we can't use it anymore. And that's just something I think with all the concussions and injuries that they've been having, it's a way to make sure that the equipment's well taken care of. But again, it adds an extra cost. We just got to be smart with it.
Any other questions? Thank you, Charlie. Dr. Moeller, one of the other ones on here, and we had talked about this before with the contract psych services. We had contracted, I guess, with Mount Pleasant.
Right.
And I guess the price had gone up somewhat since we contracted with them.
Yeah, that was a rough estimate that we had last year because we were in the very early stages of how that was all going to work out, so it did go up a little bit.
Okay.
Now, next year, Mount Pleasant is in discussions as well in terms of what they are planning to do with their psychologists. And there's a possibility that they may or may not have a psychologist available for us, but we don't know the answer to that question yet.
Would we be able to partner with another school district if we can't do it with Mount Pleasant?
I believe so.
Any other questions?
Just one way to, or let me just clarify it, is the comparable figure at the present time, last year, the 596, or almost 600,000 that we took from the fund balance, used, and the comparable figure this year would be 971, or about a $400,000 difference.
Actually,
And I'm subtracting the special project or capital
Actually,
projects.
with the closing of the books for the 13-14 school year, we had a surplus of $565,000. A little distinction there, no brackets around that number. So it was a positive return after all things were said and done.
As in a,
Now, this year's budget, we have a forecasted deficit of $596,000 in the 14-15 budget. Is that the column you're looking at?
that's what I was looking at.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
that was one I was
My
looking
error.
at. Yeah.
And our hope is that, number, when the books are closed, we're hoping that that number is much closer to zero than we had originally budgeted, but we don't have that projection just yet.
The other thing, Levi, and if I'm wrong, correct me here, Jim, but that $596,000 deficit that we had last year that we were showing on the books, if you're comparing that to the 971 that we're down to now, again, that also included a tax increase last year,
Yes, it did.
and we don't have that in there this year, so.
Right.
No, I was just, I mean, if just that 400,000 difference there, if you just, I suppose, one, if I'm optimistic, hoping the state, this governor ran on education, hoping there might be more coming there, but who knows there. But I suppose one way of framing it would be, say, what would be further cuts that we could do, however painful. Not to say that we're going to do them, but to reduce the amount of that figure.
Our building principals are ready to meet that, and if we come up with a figure, to cut in supplies, et cetera, we'll give them that number, and then we'll let them work out the details on how to do it within the structure of their plans for next year, so.
Well, in answer to your question, Levi, and it's a good one, and I think it's certainly valid, if it were to stay at that figure, using that amount of money from the fund balance would be astronomical for us. So I think we might have to look at some of the things that we've already approved. We have 12 retirees, and we have said we're going to replace only 10 of them. We might have to look at that if it came down to that. I certainly think that's one area, if you're looking at a large savings, that is something we'd have to consider. But again, we're not there yet. I don't think we need to look at it just yet.
And that's where these discussions are good, and to continue to look at the budget. So this is a healthy discussion. It keeps us focused.
Well, we have nothing else. We need to discuss the possibility of having the meeting on the 21st. See how that fits in everybody's schedule, or,
You want another budget discussion?
Yes.
Before that?
well, before that, before the 21st.
Right. It's up to you.
How do you feel about that? You want another discussion? You want to sit down and,
We have an agenda meeting on the 7th, right?
we do.
You could have like your agenda meeting and then adjourn,
Include that
and
in-
then go into a budget discussion meeting rather than, have
Have
a
it.
whole new separate night. Just a thought.
Will that give you, that'll give you another couple of weeks, Jim?
Sure.
To look at that?
Yeah, there's components out there. We're still waiting for the Westmoreland Intermediate Unit special education budget. So we've got some estimates in there, but still like to have the actual budget in hand. So we may have that, and we may not. Whatever new information comes to light, I'll work it in. and summarize it for you. We picked up 100,000 tonight, another close to 6,000 with that Patterson pump, so the number's coming down. Put another 100,000, so it's actually down to 866,115.
Is that all right with the rest of you? We'll do the meeting instead of having another special meeting. We'll just tack it onto the,
Sounds good.
that will save us another night. All right, we'll do that, Jim.
And would you like to do your preliminary adoption on May 21st?
I think that would be wise.
Okay, we'll get those meetings posted.
Everybody aware on that May 7th meeting. I will be here as soon as I can. That's my graduation that we have to attend. So, but as soon as that's over, I'll be here so I can go through the budget.
That would be great. That's fine.
And speaking of graduation, I'll remind you of this again on May 7th, but we have 4 students graduating from Clairview School on May 20th at noon, and that is held at the former Sheraton, or is it a Ramada now, up on the hill there across from the mall. So if you happen to be free at noon on May the 20th, it would certainly be an experience that I think you'll find to be most rewarding. Noon.
Just sort of I don't know whether Mr. Marnell has it here offhand, but at least of last year, we were the 3rd lowest in Westmoreland in taxes, local taxes here, which says we're running, comparatively speaking, with 17 other districts running.
And we still are, because no one has adopted
Okay.
new tax rates for the 15-16 school year.
Now, when I see that and see that it's statewide, this is raw scores. You saw that. This is sent out to. We're in the top, almost in the top 20% statewide. Out of 500 school districts, we're 113. This is raw scores. I'm not putting in anything here on what is expectations in regards to what the per capita income. This is in the top 20%. 25%, okay, in 2025. And of course, number 1 on overachieving. So we're doing some good things here in regards to getting a good product, good for what we're putting into our schools here. I've been very proud to be associated with it.
Thank you, Levi.
Citizens' comments, closing ones?
Seeing none.
I see none. Motion to adjourn. Amy, Love move to adjourn. Butcher seconded. We're out of here. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.